here we go with 7.5. So this is the last thing that you guys will be learning today. After we're done with this lesson, you guys will have time to work on your homework, which is on big ideas. So yeah, this is factoring in the general form of a polynomial, x squared plus bx plus c. B and c will always be numbers, but it's written that way because it's three different terms. You can't just take out something that's the same in each of them like what we were just doing, so there has to be a special way to do that, and that's what we're going to learn here. The first thing though is to practice making sure you know how to factor numbers, because if you can't factor a number, you're probably not going to be able to factor a polynomial. However, these numbers are actually a lot bigger than the ones that we're going to use for our polynomials. So I'm going to do one of these warm-up problems with you because I want to make sure you understand what's going on. So this says make a list of factors for the numbers. So we're going to go through each of these numbers and we're going to list all the different numbers that can go into it that are factors. So for 42, I always start like this. I know that 1 goes into 42 and I know that 42 goes into 42. Okay, so I got 2 of them. Now I'm going to go to 2. Since 42 is even, I know that 2 also goes into it. 42 divided by 2 is 21. Well, that actually helps me, 21, because if 21 goes into 42, then anything that goes into 21 will also work, which means that I know that 3 and 7 are going to work. Well, let's figure out what numbers will pair with 3 and 7. 42 divided by 3 is 14. 42 divided by 7 is 6. I'm actually going to switch the order of these. And that's all of my different factors. So that 21 really saved me to not have to do a ton of extra work. If you wanted to, right here, you could check 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. But I can actually, I'll just show you right now why you don't have to check those. I know that 8 isn't going to work because I already skipped 4. 9, you could really quick test, but since it only goes into 3, and then 14 is its pair, I know 14 is not divisible by 3, so I know 9 won't work. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. 10 is definitely not going to work because it's not divisible by 5. If it's not divisible by 5, it's not divisible by 10. Then I get to 11. 11 is a prime number. 11 we always can check because the numbers will repeat themselves when they're double digits. 42 is not a repetition of the same digit, so 11 doesn't work. 12 won't work again because 4 didn't work. 13 won't work because 13 goes into 39. 42 is too close to that, so 13 won't work, and then I'm at 14, which I already have. So that's basically the process you're going to do. You're going to try to list all of the numbers that go into the rest of these 6 problems. You can pause me, work on them on your own, and then in a minute I'll give you the answers. Okay, hopefully you paused me. Here are the answers. We already did this one. 1, 3, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 14, 21, and 42. Good, those are the numbers I said, so I'm glad that I didn't do it wrong. 102, 1 and 102, 2 and 51, 51, never mind, I'll talk about that later. 3 and 34, 6 and 17. And then again, once you get here, you can check 7 if you want to. 102 divided by 7. Maybe you can do it in your calculator really quick and see if it goes in. 8, I know isn't going to work because 4 doesn't work. 9, again, I know 9 isn't going to work because 3 and 34. 34 is not divisible by 3, which means I'm not going to be able to move 3 of them over here. Again, if that doesn't make sense, you can just check it. 10 definitely won't work. 11 definitely won't work. 12 won't work because 4 doesn't work. 13, you can check really quick for yourself if you want to make sure 13 doesn't go into this evenly. 14 won't work since 7 doesn't work. 15 won't work since 5 doesn't work. 16 won't work since 4 doesn't work. And now I'm done because my next number is 17. So I'm good on that one. 28, the list is shorter since it's a smaller number. 1, 2, 4, 7, 14, 28. 56, 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 14, 28, 56. So if you figured out some tricks while you were doing this that come up with factors easily, maybe you can share them with the people around you. 60 has a lot of factors since we know it's going to be divisible by 10, which means it's divisible by 5 and 2. That gives us several right there. And then 6 is divisible by 1, 2, and 3. So we have a lot of answers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then all of their pairs. 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, 60. That's a lot. 36 has a lot too. 36 is one of those numbers because it's divisible by 12, which is divisible by 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 36 is divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, 12, 18, and 36. We got lots of combinations on that one as well. So the reason that we just spent so much time doing that is because the process that you use to solve polynomials involves needing to know factor values for c, which is that number that's on the end. So we are going to talk about factoring for the rest of this time for polynomials instead of numbers. Okay, so this says factor x squared plus 10x plus 16. So basically there are two steps to this. If you think about before, I used to be given something that looked like this and then asked to FOIL it to get these answers. You remember that? So I'm pretty sure that they're going to both start with x. Since x times x is x squared, that part's pretty easy. We're already done with one of our numbers. But now we have to figure out what goes here and what goes here. Well, if you remember when we learned how to FOIL, when we FOILed first, outer, inner, last, here's first, and then outer, inner gives us this part. We'll talk about that in a second. And then last gave us this number. So I know that whatever number goes here needs to multiply by 16. So whatever two numbers, we're going to call those numbers P and Q, because that's what mathematicians have decided to call them. We know that they have to multiply to 16. Well, we just practiced figuring out things that multiply to 16. 1 and 16, 2 and 8, or 4 and 4. Now, whatever pair I pick has to have something to do with this number 10. How am I going to get 10 from this? Well, what I also know is that my outer and inner, when I combine them, I always get my middle term. Do you guys remember that? Inner plus outer, we always ended up with 4 different terms. And then whatever these two were, I'm giving you a hint here because these are going to be the answers. These two terms came together to become 10x. So we know two things actually. We know that p times q needs to be 16, but we also know that p plus q needs to be 10. So p times q needs to be 16, and p plus q needs to be 10. Which one of these two pairs adds up to 10? 2 and 8. So everything in here is positive, which means my answers are both going to be positive. Ooh. And that is how you factor. That's how you get it from the FOILed standard form into the factored form. You think about what multiplies to c and adds to b. Remember, this form is x squared plus bx plus c. So we want to think of what multiplies multiplies to c, adds to b. Multiplies to c, adds to b. You might want to write that to yourself. Note, multiply to c, add to b. Or something like that, okay? That's pretty much what we're going to be doing for a long time. Everything that has to do with polynomials, we're going to learn how to do something really similar to what we just did here. Multiplies to c, adds to b. So the way I did that is I listed all the different things that multiply to c, and then I picked the one out of the list that adds to b. Not that horrible. Once we start dealing with negatives and positives, it gets a little bit trickier, but basically that's what we're doing. We're listing numbers that multiply to c and then choosing the pair that adds to b. Yeah. So, sorry. Oh, no. There we go. So let's do another one together. Then I'm going to have you guys try some on your own. So like I just said, we want it to multiply to c, add to b. So I'm going to do extra steps. Some of you guys probably are getting it and don't need to do these extra steps, but the first thing I'm going to do is take the number 14, my C value, and list all of the factors. What numbers could P and Q be? They could be 1 and 14, they could be 2 and 7, and that's it. I have a lot of freedom here to really just add both of them up, and I'm gonna get my answer really fast. Okay, they need to multiply to 14, and they need to add to 9. Well, which of these pairs adds to 9? 2 and 7, which means that my answer is going to be x plus P, x plus Q. That's my answer. P and Q. Doesn't really matter, that's just the notation that we use. Yeah, so these are my answers. You could also write x plus 7, x plus 2. I don't care what order you put multiplication problems in. 3 times 4 is the same thing as 3 times, or 4 times 3. They're equal. So it really doesn't matter what order you go in. So see if on the next 2 problems you can figure those 2 out on your own, and then in a minute we'll come together and we will see if you did it the right way. All right? Okay, here are the answers to these problems. 6, you can choose between 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. We want to pick the pair that adds to 7, which would be 1 and 6. So there's my answers. Here, 8 can multiply 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. 1 and 8 are my choices since 1 plus 8 is 9. There are the answers. So they're starting us off nice because they're not using any negatives yet. On the next problem, though, we're going to see what happens when we have negative numbers. Okay, so on this one, it's still the same idea. We want to see what multiplies to 12. But I also want to think about what adds to negative 8. Well, what does that mean? If a number multiplies to a positive number but adds to a negative number, what do I know about my solutions? Well, I know that 2 positives multiply to a positive or 2 negatives multiply to a positive. Do you know that? Hopefully, yes. And I also know that if I want to get negative 8 down here, there has to be negatives involved in this equation. So the only way I can multiply and get positive 12 is if both of my numbers are negative. So I'm going to list all the things that multiply to positive 12 but can give me a negative answer. Okay? So the things that multiply to positive 12 to give me a negative answer would be negative 1 and negative 12. Right? These multiply to 12. If I added them together, I get negative 13. So I'm on the right track. I could also do negative 2 and negative 6, or negative 3 and negative 4. All of these combinations multiply to negative 12. These are the factors, or to 12. These are the factors. I just made them all negative. Now I want to pick the pair that comes together to become negative 8. Well, I just said this one's negative 13. This one looks like a good candidate. This one comes out to be negative 7. So these are my pairs. My answer to this one then would be x minus 2 and x minus 6. So you can put a little note to yourself on this one if you want. Note, when C is positive and B is negative, both P and Q are negative. So when C is positive, when I'm multiplying to a positive number, and B is negative when I need to add to a negative, then that means both of my numbers, P and Q, that's just what we call them, need to be negative solutions. Okay, you can call these something else if it would help you remember, but when I make a chart, I'm really going to try to remember to always put P and Q on the top so that we remember. Those letters don't really mean anything except for that they're constants in a polynomial equation, so we see them a lot. P and Q are negative because I need to multiply to a positive and add to a negative. The only way that that's going to happen is with 2 negative numbers. Yeah. Cool. So let's do another one like that. I already have my handy dandy little note written up here, which is that when C is positive and B is negative, both of them are negative. Well, that's happening again. I have positive 27, which means they have to be the same sign. And they need to add to negative 12, which means that sign has to be negative. So I want to think about the two numbers that multiply to positive 27 and add to negative 12, which means all of my options are going to have to be negative numbers. So negative 1 and negative 27, negative 3 and negative 9. Those are my only options since 6, 7, and 8 don't work. So these are my two options. Which one of them come to be negative 12? Negative 3 and negative 9. So my answer is x minus 3 and x minus 9. I factored it. Okay, so I used my note again. Like I said, the main thing here is going to have to be being really careful with your signs. Okay, so you have to know that if it multiplies to a positive, the signs are the same. They're either both going to be negative or both going to be positive. Since they add to a negative, that's what tells me. In this case, they both have to be negative numbers. Okay. If you need a second, you can pause me if you're lost about how I decided they were negative. Hopefully you're getting me. All right, so we just talked about what happens when B is negative. Now we're going to talk about what happens if C is negative. So if C is negative, that means, well, how do I multiply to get a negative number? I multiply to get a negative number by making one positive and one negative. So I'm actually going to have a lot of options on here. Instead of listing every single one, like I could have negative 21 and positive 1 or positive 21 and negative 1, I'm just going to write all of my factors out. So I have to write down the factors for 21 since that's my C value. 21 and 1. I'm going to erase this because I've been doing it the opposite way. 1 and 21, 3 and 7. Those are my only options. I know that one of them's negative and one of them's positive. Well, what happens when we combine a negative with a positive? They go against each other, they fight, right? Good guys and bad guys, they fight each other. I end up subtracting. If they all get in a fight, whoever wins is whoever had more people on their side. So I want to choose the one that has a difference of 4. If these numbers were all fighting each other, I want them to have a difference of 4. Well, right here, if I have 3 bad guys and 7 good guys, the good guys are going to win because they have a difference of 4. They have 4 more people on their team. So I know that my numbers are 3 and 7 because my signs have to be opposite to multiply to negative 21. And they need to have a difference of 4. Okay, so I know for sure that these are my numbers. Well, now I have to decide which one is negative. I know one of them has to be negative to multiply to negative 21. How do I decide which one that is? Well, I just told you, maybe you heard it, maybe not. My answer, my middle term needs to come out to be positive 4. So who's going to win this battle? The positives. The positives are going to win because they have more people. So I'm going to have positive 7 and negative 3 as my answers. Okay, let me explain that one more time. So negative 21, that tells me my answers, one of them is positive and one of them is negative. The only way to multiply to get a negative number is to have one of each. So I know that I'm creating a battle this time, okay? These numbers are going to have opposite signs. It's the only way I can get negative 21 for C. So I'm having a battle. I know that the positives are going to win by 4. So I choose my pair that has a difference of 4, and then I make sure that the positives win since this is a positive 4. So my answer is going to be x minus 3 and x plus 7. Positives win by 4, right? Positives win by 4, and what happens when I multiply my last terms? I get negative 21. So I did it right. You can really quick check, add them together, you get 4, multiply them together, you get negative 21. I did it the right way. Okay, let's do another one of those before I release you to be on your own. Factor x squared plus 7x minus 8. All right, minus 8 tells me that they have opposite signs. The only way to multiply to C is to have a negative and a positive. I'm going to have one of each. If they were both negative, that would come out to be positive. If they were both positive, it would come out to be positive. The only way that you can multiply to get a negative number is with a battle. So I know my numbers are going to be battling this time. All right, I'm still listing factors of 8, 1 and 8, 2 and 4. That's it. These numbers are battling, and I want the positives to win by 7. So which one of these pairs would have a difference of 7? Right here, 1 bad guy versus 8 good guys. I want the positives to win, so I make the positives the bigger team, and the negatives the smaller team. My answer comes out to be x minus 1 and x plus 8. Okay, so maybe around here you need to put a note to yourself that when C is negative, it's a battle. Find the difference. Okay, so when C is negative, you're finding the difference of P and Q. When C is negative, you're always going to be finding a difference. One of them is going to be positive, one of them is going to be negative. You can always check your work really easily on these. Add them. Negative 1 plus 8, 7. Negative 1 times 8, negative 8. Good. Okay, so that is all the different ways you can factor. We've done them where they're both positive. We've done them where C is negative. We actually didn't do one where this was negative as well, but it doesn't matter. If this were negative, you would just switch these signs because then the bad guys would win. What really matters is the sign of C. If it's positive, they're going to have the same sign. If it's negative, they're going to have opposite signs. So if that's something you want to write down, you surely can. When C is positive, they'll have the same sign. When C is negative, they'll have opposite signs. All right, so you guys have a couple problems you can try on your own, a bunch of different factoring, and that'll be the end of everything you've had to learn today. So you made it through a whole day of video lectures. Congratulations. Pause me, we'll go over the answers to this in a second. Oh, that's her explaining it. We won't do that. Okay, here we are. So the answers. Number 3, since C is positive, I know my answers or my signs need to be the same. And since B is negative, that means that number is negative. So you should get W minus 1, W minus 3. Okay. On 4, same thing. C is positive, which means they have the same sign. That sign has to be negative since B is negative. So you get N minus 5 and N minus 7. 4, they're both going to be negative, negative 2 and negative 12. 6, they're going to be one of each since it's a battle. C is negative. Negative 15 tells me that they need to multiply one positive and one negative. And I know that the positives are going to win. So x squared plus 2 means the positives are going to win, which means that when I choose my factors, the positive number is going to get bigger. That would give me x minus 3 and x plus 5. 5 needs to win by 2. All right. Number 7 should be y minus 2, y plus 15. And 8 should be v plus 6, v minus 7. So on this one, we want two numbers that multiply to negative 42. That means they're battling. One's positive, one's negative. And they're going to have a difference of negative 1. Remember, there's always a 1 right here. Even if it's not written, you can always put a 1 out there if you're lost. They should have a difference of 1, which means we're going to pick 6 and 7. And then we want the negatives to win this time, so 7's going to get the negative sign. Okay, so that is the end of these lessons.